Welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hunter. My pronouns are he, they, and you are joining the Power to Fly Chat and Learn today. It's going to be a really smoky one. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be super fun. So I will bring on our guest in just a moment. Before we get started, you can participate. Feel free to turn your cameras on. It's a great way to connect with our speaker and myself when you ask your questions. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. We are recording this and we're going to send a rewatch link in the next few days. And you'll also see it posted to our YouTube channel. And please, 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 please participate by asking questions. Ask them often, ask them early. We would love to hear from you and also your thoughts and reactions. The way you can do that is you can go over the chat section and then you can ask them publicly in the chat. Or if you would like to ask a question anonymously, you can select my name, Hunter, and then you can DM me and I will ask that question on your behalf. So I'm happy to do that. You can also message me if anything comes up, you have any questions or concerns, we will address those as swiftly as possible for you. Okay, without further ado, we are going to welcome our guest today. I'm very, very excited about this chat. We are already getting into it before you logged in, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. We need to wait and save this for the showbiz moment when we go live. So I'm very, very, very excited about this. Okay, so we have Miriam today. So Miriam, after 15 years as a successful art director in the cosmetics industry in NYC, Miriam took a leave from corporate beauty in 2009 and launched, say it again for me, Miriam.
Christie's.
Christie's, yes, it's so fun to say. Launch Christie's, a branding collective with a mission of giving back. Miriam became well-versed in navigating government, city policies, and urban gardening while working on the local school district on equity and green initiatives. In the process, she fell in love with plants and started developing a curiosity about cannabis. In 2006, Miriam launched Herbas, a plant-based body care company. Today, Miriam continues to sit on CB9 on the Youth Education Committee and currently co-chairs the Cannabis Taskforce. She is one of the 266 small brands and growers in the New York City Office of Cannabis Management's first cohort on compliance and mentoring training. Please welcome our guest today, Miriam. Hello, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. I just want to correct, in 2016, I launched Herbas, not 2006. Yeah.
So, thank you. That was my dyslexia, just skipping over numbers.
It's all good. I do it all the time too.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the intro.
Oh, my pleasure. Miriam and I are both New Yorkers, so we were having a little talk before we got started here. And so Miriam, we have so many great questions that the audience pre-submitted in advance, and then they can also ask questions live. So we would love to hear from you, audience out there. And so someone asked, I think it's a great way to kick us off. Could you expand on your journey into the cannabis industry? Can you share with us, how did you get started? What was that lead up to where you are now?
So I started recreationally. I studied art and design, and I'll be honest, cannabis was always my go-to thing to get creative, before I had to do a big project, smoke a little, consume a little. And, in New York City, you get involved in things and one thing leads to another. And I was dating someone who was in the illicit space while I was a student at Parsons. And I always said, if this ever becomes legal, I want to work in this. I want to design logos. I want to design brands. I remember doing a project at Parsons where you had to merge two editorials. It was an editorial project. You had to merge two magazines. And I used the topic of cannabis, supposedly merging National Geographic and Paper magazine. But I always had that curiosity and that desire to be part of it. fast forward, I did not marry that guy, but I married someone else with family in Colorado. So I was aware and participated in the legal Colorado market right when it launched. And I was in the beauty industry at the time. And, being in packaging and merchandising, I could see the merger between wellness, beauty, and cannabis. And I said, I got to get in here. I have to do this. I came back to New York, and this was like 2014, 2015. And I Googled, like, all good journeys begin on Google, cannabis women, New York City, and I ended up at Women Grow. And this is an organization that till this day I encourage women. If you're curious about cannabis, it's a nationwide organization for women entrepreneurs, patients, just kind of curious, in any sense of the word. It's where I started networking. So that was where I began, with an iPad, my design portfolio, in this like speed dating type networking event of like, this is what I do and this is my interests. And of course, there was no brands to design legally in 2014 in New York. So I just kept going to every event I could. I quickly learned about the social injustices around the history of cannabis. And once you learn this, you can't unlearn it. And I started advocating, and I became a cannabis advocate since I already was part of my local community board and involved in public education equity. I thought, well, why not pivot and, come out of the green closet? And I haven't gone back in.
I love those two terms, the can of curious and the green closet.
Those are real. It's there's a lot of stigma
Yeah,
in coming out of the green closet, even in a legal state. So it
right.
takes a little courage. And back then it took a lot. I'm a parent, so it was risky. A lot of people laughed. I'm sure when I put it on my LinkedIn profile, I lost out on jobs, but I
Mm.
was passionate about it, and I got involved in advocacy for legalization. And I'm trying to be more business like now, but it started with advocacy. And that is how, when you're in an illegal state, you have to enter the space, you have to advocate for it, you have to try to wrong the rights, because it just feels better to do it that way.
Yeah. Would you say that the stigma has shifted over the past few years?
It's like a pendulum. It has
Mm,
swung.
mm,
I think, the leading up to legalization, there was a lot of hope. There was a lot of people shifted. With legalization and the slow rollout and the extreme cases of illicit shops in New York, a lot of people who supported legalization are now against it and are fed up with cannabis. So the over use of it that's going on in New York City has kind of brought back a lot of stigma, which
mm.
is not a good thing, while we're still fighting to break stigma. So it's
Yeah,
it's a very interesting time, but more people are open to it because it is legal. They feel safer. There's people that, because government is a part of it, now believe it's okay. So you are seeing older people who might not have tried it now trying it because it's legal.
right.
So it's both ways. It's tricky what's happening right now.
Yeah. Because it's top of mind, because we were talking about it right before we jumped on, and you just mentioned the illicit
Mhm.
shops in New York City. I was just sharing how there's upwards of 20 within like a 5 block radius of my house, and I was just like, oh, these cannabis shops. Can you share with the listeners what you were sharing with me before we jumped on?
So all of these cannabis shops, they're all illegal. New York City has 3 legal shops in Manhattan. They are going to open a shop in the Bronx. I think they opened one in the Bronx. They opened one in Queens. And I think they're working on one in Brooklyn because there was a lawsuit that put an injunction on all the boroughs except Manhattan. So there are about 1,500 illicit shops spread out across the 5 boroughs, and it's happened upstate. It's statewide. Um, I mean, if you're in Manhattan and you go to the Lower East Side or you're Midtown, it's door to door. The enforcement was slow and it wasn't steady and it wasn't enforced in the beginning. So it kind of unleashed a Pandora's box for everyone to go ahead and bank in while they can. And it's just very important for people to understand that the product in these shops is untaxed, unregulated. You're getting a lot of product that is rejected in other states, which didn't pass testing. So it's not good, these shops, and for more reasons than one. It's also affecting venture capitalists wanting to invest in New York, which is really hurting small social equity businesses, because remember, New York did something groundbreaking. We didn't just legalize, we passed the MRTA bill, which is the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which is a groundbreaking piece of legislature that puts social justice at the forefront. You know, many states have legalized and then come back and say, well, let's carve out a piece for those formerly incarcerated. Let's carve out a piece for the communities most impacted. Well, New York State launched with that at the forefront. And while it was well intended, it has also delayed the rollout of the 9 actual license types, one of which is retail. You know, an average New York resident cannot apply for a retail license yet, and we're going on year 3. So who's created this situation to a large extent? The state, by not rolling this out faster. And you know, having been part of the writing and the advocacy, you have to take time. You know, when you're writing this, it's the details. You cannot go back and change regulations that easily. So you have to make sure to do it right. So it's been a very slow process. It has created a lot of backlog in product in the state. It's created a lot of out of state flow into the state, and it's created a lot of contempt for the industry on people who were on the fringe. They're fed up with this. So
Yeah.
Not a good look.
Not a good look, New York. Not a good
No.
look. So the topic today, there's so much in there, and I hope we can get into all of it in our next 45 minutes. This is a huge topic. So we're looking today at through the lens of diversity in cannabis, building a career in the cannabis industry. So there's a lot of things to unpack there with licensing and unregulated stuff and regulated stuff. Let's go back to basics. What would be some of your main advice for someone who's looking to get started in the cannabis industry?
You need a team. You need a team you can trust. You need capital. This is a cash heavy industry. So whatever you're thinking, start thinking of who you can't do this alone. If you're going for a license type, you're going to have to deal with a lot of compliance. You're going to need someone who just addresses compliance, because it is that intricate and important to having a license in the state. So a team, I got in this as a solopreneur, you know, thought like, oh, yeah, you know, I can do this. I can't do this alone. Like once you reach a point, you have to look for a team. You have to diversify, and maybe it's not a team, maybe it's doing things remotely, maybe it's outsourcing, but you have to plan for growth and for quick growth. You can't say, well, I'll build it in a year. No, This industry is happening as you're in it. We like to say we jumped out of the plane, we have our parachutes on, and we are literally building the industry and our businesses in the air. And at any minute, anything can change. They can drop a new regulation. For example, I have a CBD brand. I started out, now I need a license. I have to renew that license every year. The first year I applied for that license, easy peasy, got it. The second time I had to go through 2 rounds. They asked for more information. So as the industry matures, so does the requirements of small businesses. So again, you need a team, you need capital, and you need to love what you're doing. You can't do this. You can't say, well, I want to be in the cannabis. What do you love to do? And shift it into this space. It might not require a license.
Mm.
You might be an amazing social marketing person. Maybe you cross over and do that. You're a branding person, a lawyer, a chemist. So you have to love what you do, because you're going to be put through the ringer. This is still federally illegal. Banking is a nightmare. You can't do a lot of things normal brands do, like Google, Amazon, Facebook. Digital advertising is a challenge. So you have to love what you do, plan for capital, lots of cash, and a good team, people you can trust.
Yeah, that is all such great advice. So you've mentioned several times licensing, right? And licenses. So somebody asked, there's so many different types of licenses.
I
Can
came
you tell us what
prepared.
some of those are and what you would recommend for folks getting started?
I came prepared.
Oh, look at this pamphlet.
So I want everyone to get familiar with the Office of Cannabis Management. If you're in New York State, just Google this, the Office of Cannabis Management, New York State, or ocm.gov.nyc or .ny, ocm.gov, just Office of Cannabis Management. There you will find anything you need to know about the new, there you go, it's in the link, thank you. Anything you need to know about this industry, regulations, license types, just anything, it's all there. It's an official, legit industry. It has taken them 3 years to staff this. And by the way, they are hiring. If you want to work in the legal cannabis industry, they're still filling positions statewide. Again, go there, get familiar, ask, just everything's in there. There's 9 license types. So what has been released so far is the cord. This was something that the Office of Cannabis Management decided to create to enhance our MRTA, the Marijuana Taxation and Regulation Act. Cord basically gave the license, the first license types to persons and their families or relatives who were formerly incarcerated for marijuana convictions. So if you actually served time, or your father or your mother or your cousin or your brother and your family was impacted by that incarceration, you were able to apply, I believe 2 years ago, to this cord license type. And those are the dispensaries that are currently open. What was really amazing about this license type was they were giving these families, these guys, turnkey operations. In other words, they were getting a retail location in a high traffic location in New York. So if you look at where the first legal dispensary opened, it was on Bleecker and West Broadway, smacked. There was the Housing Works, which was the old Gap on 8th Street and Broadway. That is run by Housing Works, which is a nonprofit. That was the first dispensary to open in New York City. That was the first and legal dispensary to open in New York City.
Oh, that's
for
amazing.
everyone's information. It's on 8th Street and Broadway. It was the former Gap. So the those two dispensaries, one was a formerly incarcerated member, man and his son. They run smacked, and the Housing Works is actually, if you look into Housing Works, they hire formerly incarcerated people and do a lot of work with that population. So the first license types went to them. The first growers in the state were also conditional cultivators. So the hemp farmers that were already growing hemp legally since the Farm Bill in 2018 were given the okay to plant and grow cannabis as soon as we legalize. Because remember, with a legal market, you cannot bring product from out of state. You have to only use product grown in the state to process, to make gummies, to make edibles, to make everything. So just the life cycle of that whole process to start and grow plants and harvest and process and all of that took 2 years.
Wow.
So that is the behind the scenes why it's taken so long, because the Office of Cannabis Management, while the law gave the 9 license types, which was cultivator, processor, nursery, distributor, retail dispensary, micro business, on-site consumption, delivery, and cooperative. New York has amazing license types. They decided to create CORD, which is a beautiful thing because it addresses social justice at a whole other level that no other state has done. And if you notice, there's no MSOs. When I say MSOs, are multi-state operators. You don't have cookies chains out here. You don't have all the traditional chains that you're seeing across the bridge in New Jersey. They are not allowed to operate in New York State, I think, for almost 8 months or a year after the first retail dispensaries open. I might be off on the date, but New York has been very intentional and deliberate in its social justice. I mean, our taxes, the legal cannabis is taxed 13%. That breakup, and again, this is all on their website. I got this at an event. Again, you want to be in this space, you need to go to events, you need to educate yourself, and you need to stay informed because things change rapidly. It's an emerging industry. The taxes are 13%, state 9%, local 4%. But of that, 40% goes into an education pool statewide. So cannabis is going to fund 40% of New York State's public education for everyone to realize why it's better to support the legal industry. Also, 40% of community grants are going into reinvestment fund for healthcare, housing, childcare services, and 20% will go into drug treatment and public education about drug treatment statewide. So they're trying to do something amazing here. It's just these 1,500 plus illicit shops came out of nowhere. You know, New York is extra spicy. You're a native New Yorker. We're extra. That is our extraness. These 1,500 shops that, what do we do?
I completely agree that it really did feel like it came overnight.
They did. They did. I live in
wild.
West Harlem, and I remember one night seeing a white van just pulling out, Zaza snacks and, exotic snacks, because they started out as the exotic snack shops. Like you could get 50 million Oreos from all around the world and Twix bars from every country on the planet.
Yeah.
Then it quickly became cannabis.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly.
It was slick.
New Yorkers know how to be slick. That is one thing we know is true. Yeah, I'm looking at the Office of Cannabis Management website. There's so much great info there. It's also great to hear about the Housing Works.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of Housing Works. I donate all my stuff to when I
do
a clean. I go to Housing Works because they're really inclusive. They are there for LGBT folks and other underrepresented groups. They've done so much great stuff. So that's really cool to hear that they were the first licensed place in New York City.
And that was controversial.
Uh-huh.
That was controversial because, again, social equity, social justice, should it have been a nonprofit versus families, but there's always going to be that in New York. Again, we're always going to comment, and people are always going to say yay or nay, no matter what you do. So
right.
I think it's a good
many
thing.
Millions of people, everyone's gotten
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. And in New York, everyone has 5.
Exactly. Just depends who we're talking to and about what. So, we were just talking about, you mentioned, social equity, social justice. It's on the forefront here on the Office of Cannabis Management's website. That's like one of the main headers here. And we had a question. Someone asked, how does the cannabis industry contribute to social equity?
Good. That's a great question. So the industry is being formed with that at the forefront in New York State, first of all. There's the way the licenses are being distributed, by the way they're being structured. There's also a lot of programs and support that is supposed to be forthcoming to applicants from communities of color and women. We tend to forget that social justice in New York State also meant women. Women are underrepresented in general across industries, but in the cannabis space, it's alarming, especially such a new industry. So part of New York's initiatives is to support women in the space. As you mentioned with my bio, I was part of one of the first cohorts, and this is an ongoing program that the state has committed to do to support anyone who wants to enter the space, so that your chances of success are much higher. Because what they have found, like if you look at California, if you look at all the states that have legalized, the chances of success for small operators, people of color, women, is usually slim to none. They rarely succeed because it's so heavily taxed, and they get into this without fully understanding what compliance means. And it's very quick. You can quickly get in over your head and fall behind, and then you're dealing with fines and penalties, and you're not able to move products. So you need to know what you're doing. And I think supporting people from marginalized communities is a goal and an objective. I'm in West Harlem, and I can tell you that, being on Community Board 9, that was very important for me to make sure that my community, the legacy operators, and legacy is what we call people who were in the space before it became legal. We don't call them drug dealers. We say those were legacy operators, because the truth of the matter is they held the front, and they got the product into New York when no one else could. So the goal is to have them enter the space at whatever way possible. Another great initiative I think that New York State is leading is, SUNY and CUNY, our higher education system. Not only is it free if your parents make under 120,000 right now to go to universities in New York State, but they are teaming up to provide cannabis degrees in science, in chemistry, like BMCC, Borough of Manhattan Community College downtown, is doing an incredible cannabis workforce and business development program in the fall. They are partnering also with SUNY in Orange County, SUNY Mooresville. So more and more of the SUNY universities are getting on board to offer degrees in cannabis, which to me is as exciting as a license type, because, an 18-year-old may not, who knows, 18-year-olds can be pretty amazing nowadays. They, if they don't want to get into the industry as a licensee, they can go to school and get in and come into the industry as a professional, as, a cannabis scientist, a cannabis, business degree. It's all being developed, as we fly out of the plane with our parachutes on. So it's a very exciting time for young people, young people of color, to enter this space, not as stop and frisk and through the criminal system, but through higher education. That's huge for social justice. The court is amazing, and all the support that they're going to give to applicants and grants, and holding the front so that the multi-state operators do not come in before the small businesses, is also a huge support to people of color. I mean, I know that the energy in Uptown and Harlem and the Bronx right now is electric with this space, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity people have to really create generational wealth that they never had before.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And I'm glad to hear that you describe it as electric, because I was curious while you were speaking, have you encountered folks from that are hesitant or untrustworthy, like don't trust that this will actually go from like the legacy folks, or do they feel like, oh, this is actually in our best interest?
Some are hesitant, and you have to remember, legacy is also a hustler space. A lot of these people who were in this space were in it because they didn't want to pay taxes. So it is a hard sell to invest so much in something you've been doing for so long. To some people kind of read between the lines, and they're like, hold up, wait a minute, you're telling me to invest all this money, take on all this debt, take a risk so that you can tax me, so that then I can help fix my own community. So people are pretty slick. Some people get it, but then the vast majority also don't want the stress anymore of being illegal. There's something very validating for a lot of these guys, and I know a lot of them who have received their license, to say to their families, look, I did it. I'm legit. So there's both sides, but there's some really beautiful stories out there right now. I encourage everyone to look up the CORD Foundation, CAURRD Foundation, or even Just Us Foundation right here. She's a dear friend of mine, Cheryl, and she's a lawyer working with formerly incarcerated members of our communities in helping them get through the license, go through the license process, because it is a lengthy process, and you have to have a lot of dots, the eyes with the dots and the T's crossed, and it's hard for these guys to do this. They've been working underground for a long time, so they need a lot of support. So there is a lot of nonprofits doing the work. There's another one, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, but it's like minorities or organizations. There's like Latino Cannabis Organization, Latinas Grow. This is also with NYC through New York, Cannabis through the Small Business Development Center in New York, Cannabis NYC, Dashita Dawson. Oh, I have a QR code right there.
Oh, amazing. Scan that, folks.
And this is through the Small Business Development Center in New York City, again, supporting people of color, women, if you're LGBT, the goal of New York is to have an industry that is diverse and inclusive, and it creates generational wealth for people who otherwise would not have been able to before. And that said, you don't have to put everything on the risk here. Again, you can be a part of this industry and not have a license. I mentioned the 9 license types. Well, a cultivator, nurseries, if you are someone who's in horticulture and gardening supplies, composting, I know some guys who opened up the new grow store in New Rochelle. They opened up just like a store with all horticulture and growing supplies, because remember, New York has home grow. So medical marijuana patients as of October last year were allowed to grow, or October this year allowed to have 3 plants, 3 immature plants and 3 mature plants. At a certain point, I think 8 months or 12 months after the first dispensary opened, which, the clock started months ago, everyone in New York can home grow. That brings a whole other set of concerns, but that is a whole industry right there supporting home horticulture, and you don't have to have a license. The other one, security. With cannabis comes security guards, security industries, security services. There's a license for delivery. Delivery people are going to need security services.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking in the tech world, compliance software, that works with the state's software, like learning what is the state's software. Right now, there's one company, Dutchie, which has the monopoly basically because they've created the software. They did it first. It doesn't mean it can't be redone. So there's a lot of opportunity to enter this space outside of the license types. I like to tell people, like, if you look at the license types in the center of a circle, the 9 license types are in that circle, but then think of all the petals outside of the center of that flower that support all those license types.
Mm.
And those can all be equitable businesses. New York put a lot of environmental requirements on packaging and production. So again, solar infrastructure, people who know how to build greenhouses, there's a whole industry opening up, HVAC, for these compliant spaces. I mean, to be compliant, your location has to pass like the good manufacturing GMP practices. So construction that is cannabis compliant is a huge industry opportunity, statewide as well. Architecture, designing the spaces, the new dispensaries, branding, is really big right now. There was a lot of expectations in novelty and newness in New York, but the slowdown in the industry and cash has limited a lot of innovation. So there's a lot of opportunity for innovation in product forms that you see in Colorado and California that you don't see in New York, even in the illegal market.
It's really amazing. I love that image of the flower that you were just painting for us, because that really brings all of it together with what you're saying of being a part of a team. There's so many different petals of the team there, that you don't necessarily have to have the license to be a part of this industry. And I'm curious, you really just opened me up to all these different possibilities. And someone else asked, on the other side of it, what are roles or professions that the industry is lacking currently?
Right now, labs. There's a huge backlog in chemists and labs. So think compliance. Every product that is sold, whether it's edible or it's flower, has to go through testing, state testing. So just to get the products on the shelves, the labs are at capacity. That is slowing down a lot of innovation, because with innovation, you have to work with labs. They have to test your potency, the forms. So there's a lot of opportunity for labs, for chemists, processing. Everyone is rushing to, like you said, there's like 1,500 retail stores, but how many people are going to process the biomass? There's a huge opportunity in hemp and cannabis biomass that other industries are looking at. I mean, if you look at fashion and beauty and what's happening in packaging and, trying to eliminate, packaging that comes from trees or plastics, they're looking at a lot of hemp biomass. So we should be looking at ways to process a lot of that biomass in New York State and innovative ways to use the byproduct of hemp and cannabis. Out west, there's a company, Sana Packaging, and they do reclaimed ocean plastic with hemp biomass and have created the packaging where you would put a pre-roll in. I don't have it in front of me. They also do caps out of those materials, but like we should be making a lot of things out of reclaimed plastic and biomass. And I think New York should push itself on the environmental and recycling, reusing, and kind of get out of the let's get high mentality, because there's so much more opportunity to do good besides just getting high with this that we're missing. We need more thinking on that end.
Yeah, absolutely. Plastic is a great example. I mean, we have an abundance of wasted plastic in this planet, unfortunately, and it's in the ocean and there's piles of it, and we're just shipping it off to states and countries,
and this industry comes with a lot of plastic.
Yeah.
And that is something that people have to think about. I'm not going to lie. I have a product business. I have Herbas, and I go back and forth. Do I want to be a product business in the future? Like, no matter how sustainable your packaging is, you're still creating waste.
Mm-hmm.
So apart from like having people come and pump the product out, and how can we do this better? And that is a challenge that I don't think we have solved in New York State yet. If you go into the legal dispensaries, you're going to see a lot of the same packages that have no means of being recycled. And the vape cartridges, the dab concentrate jars, the consciousness that has hit the personal care and beauty industry has to hit the cannabis space in terms of where you source. A lot of this glass coming into cannabis, where's it coming from? What's the carbon footprint of these little jars that are single use? And I think that was a miss. We have to get to a point of looking at environmental justice as social justice.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is a plant-based industry, we have to push for more environmental awareness, packaging, grows. What is the best way to do this in New York State? And I think people need to start challenging the industry. Get over the getting high, and we got weed in New York. We got to start looking at the products you buy and the brands you buy. Like, where do they buy their packaging? What happens to it afterwards? The beauty industry cleaned itself up because consumers forced it to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like this growing pain that it's in the middle of, where we started to have a reckoning about plastic just as a country or as a planet, really just very recently. It's a very new thing that people are like, oh, I'm going to buy this product because it doesn't use plastic, because it uses, hemp or bamboo or whatever. but it sounds like it's still very, it's like you said, it's a miss in this industry right now, at least in New York City.
Yep. And, Lego, think Legos. Legos put an objective that by 2030, they want to be made by hemp, made out of hemp, all the Legos.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there's, again, these are things that were going on before New York legalized.
Yeah.
And we're so focused on just doing the social justice restorative work that we kind of forgot that social justice is environmental justice, especially in communities of color. Like, we cannot take on more trash. We cannot take on more unsafe products. We can't keep sourcing things without any consciousness. Like, we have to do better. So it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves, because with sustainability comes usually an increased cost.
Mm-hmm.
So how will the state help small brands meet those sustainable objectives? How will they help, social justice impacted brands meet those objectives? So there's a lot of opportunity still for everyone to weigh in. I know that all the community boards in Manhattan have a cannabis task force at this time. It is an active discussion how this industry rolls out in communities. We're literally creating guidelines so that when anyone who wants to run a cannabis business within our area, they have to adhere to certain things, or they have to be a good neighbor. They have to, it has to be done right. So I still encourage people to get involved, have an opinion, go to the Office of Cannabis Management and give your feedback. Go to your community boards, say what you want happening in your community with this. It's you have to think back at where alcohol was, and when prohibition happened, it only happens once, and they're not going to get it absolutely right. A lot of this is being modeled the way liquor licenses are distributed and handled. The Office of Cannabis Management is under the State Liquor License Authority. It's kind of like a branch of that. So they don't have it 100% right. There's a lot of room for improvement here.
Yeah. So we have just a little over 10 minutes left. There's so many topics within this. Earlier, we were talking about in other states, how it's just been dominated by a lot of, companies that are predominantly run by men, white men with a lot of cash, right? And so I'm curious to hear, someone asked, what are some of the hardships that you, Miriam, have experienced as a woman-owned cannabis organization, and how did you overcome them, or some of them? Because I'm sure there's still ongoing things as well.
It's tough as a woman. You have to have a thick skin. You have to have grit. You also have to have a street sense. I went into this, healing and, from a design background, a corporate background, but I also understood the street game. It's a hustler's industry. All those big MSOs, a lot of those guys used to deal weed in school. So you have to have a lot of respect for yourself as a woman in the space, because you are going to be in a lot of rooms where they're not going to see you, because it's just guys. Like, it used to be a lot of the, and there's different guy circles. It's not all the bros. What you described are the chads, the MSO chads, that they're in their suits, they have the money, they can venture capitalists. These guys know how to pull a deck together and raise capital, and they know how to talk the talk. And, then you have the legacy, the guys who used to run the corners, and they got the hoodies and the caps, and like, if you're not like street whatever, like, they don't want to know you. So how do you, as a woman, hold your own? You have integrity, you have respect, and you know your shit. Like there's no other way. You have to be solid on your word, on what you do. Um, Pay your way. Don't expect any favors. Let your work speak for itself. I mean, this is just something I carry anywhere, but particularly in this space that is still, you have to know how to navigate. You can't come in there and tell people how to run the game and how to do things, because there's people who have gone to jail for this, and you have to give them their respect. Your degree means nothing. They went to jail and they continued to deliver, and they paid the price, and you have to respect people who paid that price in this space. No matter where you come from, what your business is, you have to know how to navigate and give that respect to people, or you will not make it a second.
Great advice. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. There's so many great questions left. Someone on a related note, someone asked, how do you manage people's opinions regarding your work in the cannabis industry? I often feel judged by my inner circle and would appreciate your advice, Miriam.
Again, knowledge is power, even in cannabis. When people start saying, oh, it's a drug, just explain to them the science. Tell them when it was discovered, and explain the endocannabinoid system. And part of that stigma is because the endocannabinoid system was technically discovered in the 90s, and the molecules were synthesized somewhere in the 70s, THC and CBD. So medical schools did not teach about the endocannabinoid system, which is a vital system, like the digestive system, circulatory system. It actually creates balance within all the other systems. So when you hit people with facts and knowledge and reality, and listen, the CBD is legal since 2018, they back down a little bit. And I'm not trying to convince people. There's enough people on the cannabis train. Find the people who believe in it. And you don't always have to defend your stand. It doesn't always have to be a conversation about cannabis. Like, agree to disagree and change the subject. If it's someone who just wants to get into it with you, I've become a master of my energy. Not everyone's worth it. But I revert to knowledge is power and break it down to them. I mean, I'm a medical marijuana patient. I have spinal arthritis, and I use 0 pharmaceuticals since I was diagnosed. So you're going to tell me something's really bad about cannabis? Okay, go ahead, tell me. So it's, you pick your battles. But just inform yourself. If you want to take that evangelical route of speaking out and speaking up and breaking stigma, make sure you're armed with facts that you can calm people peacefully and not get into a hostile conversation about it. Because at the core of this plant is peace and tranquility and harmony. And even when you're talking about it, you always want to give that energy.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Oh, that absolutely makes sense. And I was reminded of a famous Oscar Wilde quote about other people, and what other people think of me is none of my business.
There you go. There you go.
Like I can't change their mind, and I don't really care what you think.
There you go. But there's moments where you lose, you get heated, and they trigger you. Again, get back to your center and pick your battle and proceed with grace.
Yes, grace and kindness whenever possible. And I love that you mentioned what you brought up, an element of self-care, which is preserving your energy, right? Because that's just, we can't always be doing that. Like educating, trying to change everybody's mind and protecting my identity. It's like, oh, that's exhausting.
It's not worth it in the end, and a big part of cannabis for me and cannabis use was it brought me to that still place of it brings you to a stillness with yourself that you can assess yourself better. If that helps, using this medicinally.
Yeah.
Like when you get high, blah, blah, but if you actually sit still and do the work, you can go places with this,
Yeah.
it's
Absolutely.
it's not that stereotype of, oh, you're just a stoner and you're not going to get anything done. That's not cannabis today.
Right. Right. So with just a couple minutes left, what are some of the biggest challenges the industry is facing looking ahead?
Again, these illicit shops are creating a bad look, and it's really, you need a lot of cash to do this. I'm not going to lie. To grow cannabis, to process cannabis, to have a brand, to have a legal brand. Say you make a product and you want to sell it. You need a lot of capital to do that. To manufacture the product, it has to be legal. Again, it has to be a federally good manufacturing practice. The compliant factor, you have to put aside 50 for testing with every batch. So you have to take in mind where you're going to store all these things, the temperature checks. That's why I said the HVAC. So capital is a big challenge, because again, this is federally illegal. So you can't go to a bank and say, I want to borrow $500,000 to start a business. You can't. Insurance is tricky. So it's a lot of risk. You have to kind of bootstrap as long as you can, friends and family, and then venture capital it. And venture capitalists are not being really nice with New York right now because they're saying we don't see the money. And until New York gets this illicit market under control, you're not really going to make money.
Hmm.
How am I, it's capital. So that's a big challenge, New York has right now. The illegal industry, illicit. I don't want to say illegal because we don't want to go backwards. We don't want to. New York does not want to criminalize cannabis. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to incarcerate for cannabis. So they're trying every trick under the book. The sheriff, going after the landlords, fining, through the Department of Buildings. To get this under control because it is hurting the legal industry.
Mhm.
They're making money, but not as much as they should, because there's so much outside distraction going on, and it hurts small businesses. And for example, someone like me, I would love to now take my CBD brand into the legal space, and create creams and products. I would need a lot of money to do this, and it's a lot of risk. Where am I going to get that? How am I going to get that? So we need more support for small businesses. You know, a lot of the workshops and events I go to, well, friends and family. If you go to, like, I'm in West Harlem, Northern Manhattan, friends and family here don't have $50,000 in the bank to give you. So it's not as easy to tell a person of color, do a friends and family round, as it is to ask someone of another race that might have more access at this point. So capital is a huge barrier and challenge for small businesses, access to capital, and just being able to put together a business, that will be compliant and successful, requires a lot of support. And that was promised, and it hasn't 100% materialized yet through the government.
Hmm.
So
Well,
we got
yeah,
challenges.
yeah, we got lots of challenges. Well, we're out of time. Any last maybe hopeful words of wisdom for us moving forward? Anything you hope in an ideal future where this is headed?
I really hope that more young people in New York State get involved in this industry from an academic and just get into the space from the get-go young and just take over the space globally as cannabis experts. I mean, we have an opportunity. I think apart from the social justice, just that higher education opportunity that's happening in New York is amazing. I would hope that we get our act together with the environmental parts and more people see the opportunity in processing, and we have a whole side industry of hemp biomass processing happening in New York. So that's my hopes for it, that these little roadblocks that we've had are growing pains, to create a much better industry than any other state, because we are already way ahead of other states in many ways, even though we're late. But that's New York.
Yeah, we like to show up 10 minutes casually late,
And then just be absolutely fabulous and blow everyone else out of the water.
Naturally, darling.
And that is my hope, that is what's going to happen here, that, on education, on the diversity and inclusion, the women-owned brands, the LGBT brands, the, all kinds of like the 9 license types, that we really show the world that this could be done.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for making the time today.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. For folks that want to keep the conversation going with you, what's the best way to reach out?
I am on Instagram, Miriam _Aristy_Farer, or just Herbas Body Care, New York, or just Herbas. You can find me anywhere online, just Herbas, Google me. But my brand is Herbas Body Care, and you can find me online, Instagram. I think I'm on Facebook. I think I'm on all those channels,
All the things.
But I'm in West Harlem.
Yes, we'll come hang out with Miriam in West Harlem. Well, thank you again, Miriam, so much for this.
Thank you.
We get to do it again. We could clearly talk for another hour.
I know. So nice to meet you, Hunter, and nice meeting everyone. Thank you.